Vanessa Brooks lived what many would call the ideal life. She was married to Adrian, a charismatic and successful corporate executive. Together they appeared to have it all: a beautiful home, shared ambitions, and a bond that seemed unbreakable. To everyone who knew them, they were the epitome of love and partnership. Vanessa was a social worker who dedicated her life to helping others. Her empathy and devotion to her clients were admired by many, but it was her unwavering belief in love, trust, and loyalty that truly defined her. These were the values she had built her marriage on, values she thought Adrian shared. Adrian Brooks was the kind of man who could light up any room. His charm and confidence made him a natural leader in his workplace, where he had earned respect and admiration. But beyond his professional success, Adrian was Vanessa's rock, the man she had vowed to spend her life with. Together, they envisioned a future filled with laughter, shared dreams, and a family they could cherish. But beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life, cracks were beginning to form. Cracks that Vanessa couldn't yet see. Vanessa first noticed her energy waning during the early summer. She chalked it up to her demanding job, where the emotional toll of helping struggling families often left her drained. But as weeks turned into months, her exhaustion deepened. It wasn't just fatigue anymore. Her body ached, her appetite dwindled, and she began waking up as tired as when she went to bed. Adrian, always preoccupied with work, seemed distant. He dismissed her concerns with a casual, "You've been overworking yourself, Vanessa. Take a break." Though his words were well-meaning, they lacked the warmth she once relied on. She convinced herself he was just stressed, that his growing detachment had more to do with his high-pressure job than anything else. But the doubts crept in. Why was he spending so many late nights at the office? Why had their intimacy dwindled to almost nothing? Vanessa pushed these thoughts away, blaming her overthinking. After all, Adrian was her husband, the man she trusted implicitly. When Vanessa finally saw a doctor, she expected to hear that her symptoms were due to stress or a vitamin deficiency. Instead, she was blindsided by 3 words that would change her life forever. "You have HIV." Vanessa sat in the sterile doctor's office, her mind spinning as the weight of those 3 letters sank in. HIV. The words seemed foreign, as though they belonged to someone else's life, not hers. She stared at the doctor, her voice trembling. "That has to be a mistake. I've been faithful. I've only ever been with my husband." The doctor's compassionate yet firm tone offered no solace. "We ran the tests multiple times, Vanessa. I'm afraid the results are conclusive." Numb and unable to process what she had just heard, Vanessa left the clinic in a daze. She replayed the moments of her life over and over, searching for an answer. She had always been careful, always trusted Adrian implicitly. How could this have happened? At first, denial took hold. She sought out a second opinion, then a third. Every test confirmed the same unthinkable truth: she was HIV positive. Slowly, disbelief gave to fear, then anger. As Vanessa sat alone in the quiet of her bedroom, questions clawed at her mind. Her diagnosis was a puzzle with a single missing piece. A piece that, deep down, she was terrified to admit might involve Adrian. But as the days passed and her suspicions grew, she found herself unable to ignore the unsettling possibility. Adrian had been more distant lately, claiming his job was more demanding than ever. Late nights, last-minute business trips, and a new level of secrecy had become routine. Vanessa remembered how his phone was always within arm's reach, its screen flipped downward, and how he'd bristle if she even glanced at it. Could he be hiding something? She pushed the thought aside, scolding herself for even entertaining such an idea. Adrian was her husband, her partner, the man she had vowed to trust. But the whispers in her mind grew louder, urging her to look deeper. One sleepless night, Vanessa made a decision. She waited until Adrian was fast asleep, his steady breathing the only sound in the room. Heart pounding, she reached for his phone on the nightstand. Her hands trembled as she pressed his thumb against the screen, unlocking it. The messages that greeted her made her blood run cold. Among the names of coworkers and friends in Adrian's message history was a contact saved as Mr. S. Curious and anxious, Vanessa opened the chat. What she found sent shockwaves through her entire body. The profile picture belonged to Marcus Steele, Adrian's boss, a man Vanessa had met only briefly at company events. The messages between them were explicit, filled with intimate confessions and promises that made Vanessa's stomach churn. Photos and videos accompanied the texts, each one more damning than the last. Vanessa couldn't breathe. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the conversation, piecing together a relationship that had clearly been ongoing for months, if not years. The betrayal was more than she could bear. Adrian wasn't just unfaithful, he had risked her life for his secret. One message stood out, a cruel confirmation of her worst fears. "I'm sorry about the scare, Marcus. The doctor says the meds are working, so there's nothing to worry about anymore." Vanessa's heart sank. The truth was undeniable. Adrian had contracted HIV from Marcus, and in his selfishness, had passed it on to her. The next morning, Vanessa sat at the kitchen table, her hands clenched into fists as she waited for Adrian to come downstairs. She had spent the night replaying every moment of their marriage, every lie he must have told, every time she had ignored her instincts. Now, she was ready for answers. When Adrian entered the room, she fixed him with a cold, unwavering stare. "We need to talk." Adrian hesitated, sensing the shift in her tone. "What's wrong?" Vanessa slid her phone across the table. "Explain this." He glanced at the screen, and for a moment his confident demeanor faltered, but he quickly regained his composure, forcing a laugh. "Vanessa, you went through my phone? That's such a breach of—" "Don't you dare," she interrupted, her voice trembling with anger. "Don't you dare make this about me. I know about Marcus. I know everything." Adrian's face paled, and he opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Vanessa stood, her voice rising as months of pain and betrayal erupted from her. "You lied to me, Adrian. You risked my life for him, and you didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth." Adrian's shoulders slumped, his mask of confidence slipping. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said quietly. "It wasn't supposed to." "It wasn't supposed to what?" Vanessa spat. "Ruin my life? Infect me with a disease I'll carry forever?" Adrian looked away, his silence more damning than any excuse he could have offered. Vanessa's voice cracked as she continued. "You've destroyed everything. Our marriage, my health, my trust in you. And for what? For him." Adrian's lack of remorse cut deeper than his betrayal. As he turned to leave, muttering something about needing time to think, Vanessa's fury reached its breaking point. As Adrian walked out of the kitchen, Vanessa stood frozen, trembling with a mix of rage and despair. His calm dismissal, his refusal to take responsibility, was like salt on an open wound. The man she had loved, trusted, and built a life with had shattered everything, and now he acted as if her pain didn't matter. Vanessa's gaze drifted to the small drawer in the living room, the one Adrian had insisted on using to store his handgun. She had never touched it before, never even thought of it as more than an unnecessary object he kept for protection. But now it called to her, a dark temptation in the midst of her anguish. Her mind raced, replaying every lie Adrian had told, every late-night excuse, every moment of doubt she had pushed aside. Her breath quickened as her emotions boiled over. Before she could second-guess herself, Vanessa opened the drawer and took out the gun. Its cold weight in her hands matched the icy fury in her heart. She stormed upstairs, her vision blurred by tears of anger and betrayal. Adrian was in the bedroom, casually packing a briefcase, as though their confrontation hadn't just torn her world apart. "Adrian," she said, her voice low and steady. He turned, startled by the intensity in her tone. His eyes widened as he saw the gun in her hand. "Vanessa, what are you doing? Put that down." "Why?" she demanded, her voice trembling with emotion. "So you can walk away? So you can pretend like none of this ever happened?" Adrian raised his hands, his voice softening. "Vanessa, listen to me. I know I made mistakes. I'll fix this. We can fix this." "Fix this?" she repeated, her voice rising. "You gave me HIV, Adrian. You lied to me, betrayed me, destroyed everything we built. And now you want to fix it?" Adrian stepped closer, his expression shifting from fear to frustration. "This isn't going to solve anything. Just put the gun down and we can talk." "No," she snapped, her grip tightening on the weapon. "You don't get to talk. You don't get to explain this away. You don't get to walk out of here like everything's fine." Her hands shook as she lifted the gun, the weight of her rage and heartbreak overwhelming her. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Adrian's face was a mixture of shock and disbelief as the tension in the room reached its breaking point. Then, with a single pull of the trigger, Vanessa's world erupted in chaos. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the house, ringing in Vanessa's ears as she stood frozen, the gun still clutched in her trembling hands. Adrian collapsed onto the floor, motionless. A crimson stain spread across his shirt, a stark contrast to the once pristine image of the man she thought she knew. Vanessa dropped the gun, the metal clattering against the hardwood floor. Her knees buckled and she sank to the ground, staring at Adrian's lifeless form. The weight of what she had done began to crush her, the realization sinking in like a leaden stone in her chest. This wasn't justice. This wasn't closure. It was devastation. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone, her fingers fumbling to dial 911. When the operator answered, Vanessa's voice was barely a whisper. I shot my husband. He's dead. Vanessa's arrest made headlines, the case capturing the attention of true crime enthusiasts and legal analysts alike. The media painted her as a woman scorned, a victim of betrayal pushed to the edge. Some sympathized with her, calling her actions an understandable response to unimaginable pain. Others condemned her, labeling her as a cold-blooded killer. In the courtroom, Vanessa sat silently as the prosecution laid out their case. They described her actions as premeditated, pointing to the gun she had retrieved and the confrontation she had initiated. To them, it was simple. She had chosen to kill Adrian instead of walking away. The defense argued otherwise. They painted a picture of a woman who had been systematically betrayed and emotionally destroyed. Expert witnesses testified about the psychological impact of betrayal trauma, explaining how Vanessa's discovery of Adrian's affair and her HIV diagnosis had pushed her beyond her limits. Friends and family spoke of her character, her compassion, and the love she had once shared with Adrian. But the prosecution countered with hard evidence: the gun, the bullet, and Adrian's lifeless body. No amount of emotional turmoil, they argued, could excuse taking another person's life. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned with their decision. Vanessa stood as the foreperson read the verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. The judge, acknowledging the unique circumstances of the case, sentenced her to 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15. As Vanessa was led away in handcuffs, she felt a hollow emptiness settle over her. She had sought justice, but all she had found was ruin. Adrian's betrayal had destroyed her life, and in her attempt to reclaim control, she had only sunk deeper into despair. In the quiet of her prison cell, Vanessa reflected on the choices that had led her to this moment. She thought of the love she had once shared with Adrian, the dreams they had built together, and the lies that had torn it all apart. She thought of Marcus, the man who had played a part in Adrian's betrayal, and the disease that now served as a daily reminder of her shattered trust. But most of all, she thought of herself, the woman she had been before the betrayal, and the person she had become in its aftermath. Her story was one of love, pain, and vengeance, a cautionary tale about the destructive power of secrets and the thin line between justice and revenge.